So I think I might just start with some acknowledgements and introductions. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're all on different Aboriginal lands. I'm working at Blacktown Hospital today. It's one of my hospital days, so I'm on the land of the Darug people. And I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that to all Aboriginal people who may be joining us today. Thank you very much for joining the second webinar of our CRE for Stroke Trial Innovation and Translation. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and we like copying things that have gone well in the past, and just like to acknowledge my colleagues from the Aphasia CRE who put on the most fantastic series of seminars over the last 5 years, and I've certainly enjoyed that. And we're hoping to, be as good as Aphasia by running a whole series of webinars that we hope will be useful in our sort of goal of building capacity and research expertise in stroke trial, and hopefully innovation and translation. So thanks to Vincent East and Dan Vesk and Nerida Larkin, Fiona Ellery from the Florey, who've helped set the program up. I'm Richard Lindley. I'm the director of the CRE, and I'm based in the University of Sydney with clinical work, as I said, out in the west of Blacktown. We have two speakers today, and we're first going to start with Dr. Kelvin Hill, who is well known to many people with his it must be 2 decades or more of experience with the stroke community. Kelvin. Kelvin's the National Manager Stroke Treatment at the Stroke Foundation and has worked tirelessly with audit and standards and guidelines to really improve stroke care around Australia. He's got a background in physiotherapy and business, and we look forward to hearing Kelvin's insights from perhaps the NGO charitable side of the field of how do you get started with grants and tips. So I'm going to stop sharing shortly, but first I just want to do a little bit of an advertisement for our CRE. The CRE is going to fund additional new trials and new sites. And I just want to flag that we will shortly be putting out a call for the next round. Oops, my slides are misbehaving. Can you still see my slides?
No.
Sorry, just let me get back to share. The wonders of technology. Are you seeing the slides now?
Yes.
Right. So let's. So obviously today is our theme is grant is for early career researchers. What are the opportunities in grants? We started our webinar series last month, and we're hoping to run these regularly. Just to flag that the next webinar will be on October the 18th, and also to flag that we are going to be holding an in-person meeting, which is going to be in Newcastle, which will have an opportunity for stroke researchers to pitch their ideas to the CRE experts and consumers. Further details will be coming up shortly. The workshop next week at the Asia Pacific Stroke Conference is on Wednesday morning, that we're running with the Australian Stroke Trials Network, and it's not too late to register for that session. I don't believe it's completely full yet, and look forward to meeting you all there on Wednesday morning. And finally, the details of our seed funds. Keep an eye out for this. I suspect the competition for these seed funds is going to be less than other calls, because you have to be doing something in stroke trial innovation to be able to be eligible for this funding. So it's a very focused call. And this is funded through our National Health and Medical Research Council Centre of Research Excellence. I will now stop sharing and pass you over to Kelvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just get hopefully going. Okay, can everyone see? Am I in presenter mode? Is the question?
Yes, we can see your slides, Calvin.
Well, welcome and thank you very much for this opportunity for us as the Stroke Foundation to come and talk about our research grants and just give some insight as to why and the how, a little bit of how and a little bit of background from us. So I'm doing this on behalf of Michelle Adamson, who's online, who's our coordinator, our research coordinator and guru of everything stroke research. And the executive director is Topi. I also want to just acknowledge country. I'm coming from outside of Newcastle, so I'm on Awabakal lands, and Wantakaloa is our welcome, which is not actually a welcome, I found out, but it's actually a question about which direction should I go, and that's very apt for this presentation. Importantly, I also want to recognise lived experience. If there's anyone with lived experience online, we very strongly collaborate with people with lived experience with stroke. That's stroke survivors, their carers and family, and they richly, I think, contribute to this landscape, and what we aim to do is make the biggest impact for them. So I just want to recognise that. A little bit of background about Stroke Foundation. Many of you will know we have we award grants, and we've been doing this for over 17 years, handing out a very modest 6.6 million over that time to over 220 researchers. So we really want to try and give a leg up to early careers, researchers, in order to then get the bigger grants. And we have a number of great case examples actually of getting one of our seed grants that then allowed researchers to go on and get one of the big NHMRC grants. And that's really what we aim to do. Importantly for us, we're bringing together consumers and the community and researchers together to really maximise that impact. And that collaboration is really important. We also, over more recent times, join with different community members who have been impacted, who want to leave a legacy about for their loved one. Normally it's someone who's died in their family, and they leave a portion in their will to develop or to do some stroke research. And so we partner with them to administer and to honour that legacy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But really it's about building the capacity, is having the bright brains to be nurtured for stroke research, because we understand there's a competing market and there's lots of things that you guys can do, but we really believe and have benefited over the last 20 to 30 years in the advancement that research has really brought to the stroke treatment, and that's really important. So there's three types of grants that we currently offer. The main one is our seed grants. So currently we offer, that's up to $80,000 for an 18-month project. It was 12 months, but we realised by the time people get often ethics, etc., they needed that flexibility. But it's specifically pitched for early to mid-career. So this is for people up to 7 years post graduation or the start of their research career. We understand that some people, have some fluidity in their career and might go off and have kids and whatever else. So there's a little bit of flexibility in there. So that's the seed grant is the main grants that we offer. We have in the past and recently offered a Future Leaders Grant, and this is a small grant, so up to 5,000, really to enable some resources to either attend a conference, travel overseas, and to build that collaboration and really make that connection with others. And often there's not the funds to do so. So that's our Future Leaders. The next type of grant that I mentioned before is our endowment grants. So we actually have 4 of these now, and each one of them targets a slightly different focus depending on the wishes of those who've left the grant. So, you know, Tim Glendenning was a young stroke survivor, had multiple strokes, and so it's really about targeting causes of young stroke. But you can see there's a range now. So we have 4 different endowment grants, and some of them are larger, some of them are smaller, but we administer them on behalf of the grant recipient, of the family, essentially. So for our seed grants, really like every other grant round, there's key criteria, and we really want to focus on areas where it addresses a need, but it might be separate to, you know, big focus, big grants and big money in more the acute, or we certainly are about patient outcomes, not preclinical trials. So this is very much about priority areas that we feel as a Stroke Foundation will move the dial for people with lived experience. Importantly, we've built a really strong requirement about engagement and early engagement with people with lived experience, because we see that they're an instrumental part of your research team, and they should be engaged early. And we co-developed some online resources and education around how to do that effectively. So this is becoming more and more common, obviously, and that's one important criteria. Another criteria is the diversity and inclusion. So we want to make sure that we're really hitting the nail with some of our more disadvantaged subgroups, and depending on the grant, there's more or less focus on that. We clearly have to be Australian based. We don't fund international trials or research activity at this point. And the assessment criteria is listed here. So you can see that 40% of the overall scoring goes to the scientific quality, 20% then to relevance, impact and team track record. And that's fairly common, I think. So importantly, we have a very robust peer review process. We've actually got about 100 peer reviewers across Australia and 65 international experts who have offered to be involved in our peer review. So in the seed grants, we have 5 individuals who separately review every grant, and there's a clear criteria, and there's a unique rank and a scoring system. Which really determines, that independent process really determines the ranking, and our research advisory committee really abides by that ranking unless there's specific reasons, i.e. it's a tie, or there's some uncertainty around, or there's some issues that have been raised by the reviewers. But essentially that peer review process will determine the success or otherwise of the grants. The steps involved, just as background, we have a board at the Stroke Foundation who sets the amount that we can offer each year as to the pool, the prize money, I suppose, for researchers. And then it's the Research Advisory Committee, who's currently chaired by Coralie English, who's an academic physiotherapist at Newcastle University, and they set the criteria for each of the elements. So what are the core topics that we're looking to fund this year? The round normally opens about mid-year in June. It's open for 8 weeks. It's just recently closed. and there's been there's an initial screen that Michelle does to basically say, do you meet the minimum criteria, and then the independent peer review process, which is underway. It's sort of concluding, getting to the end of the pointy end now. Those weighted criteria, as I said, are reviewed by our Research Advisory Council, and then the board signs off, and we alert people as to what our decisions have been. So that will be in November. So we try and make it as efficient as we can, and that way, by alerting people in November, we hope that they will be able to get ready and hit the ground running early in the year. So what are we looking to fund? Often because it's only a small amount, we're really looking at feasibility, but what's innovative and what's novel, what's already been done. We don't want to obviously duplicate other work, and what really provides meaningful impact to patients and what's important for them. So ideally we want national reach and the ability then to upscale or to use this as either a pilot like a phase 1 to then go on to your bigger grants in order to build on the work that will be uncovered. Things to avoid when you're thinking about submitting to our seed grants: obviously try and be very specific about the parameters. We have so many people try and fit their great idea into our criteria, and we can certainly pick that up. Be realistic about the timeframes and what you can achieve within that budget. It is only a fairly small grant, and be really clear about the why and the background, and have a very strong rationale behind it. And as I said, we will specifically look at duplication in this space and avoiding us funding unnecessarily when there's information out there. What do we look for that's successful? We want to know what impact really looks like and how this could be built on and move forward. We clearly want to have lived experience throughout the phases, so that's very early conception through to even a lot of our applications now have someone with lived experience either formally on the team or a very close relationship. Certainly it's feasible in the timeframes and the funding, which makes sense, and just be real. It's just a nice, clear, straightforward proposal, and obviously the linking with senior researchers and that wider team who you've got in the background cheering for you and who you can get support from is important. So that's just a snapshot. All the questions probably need to go to Michelle, who's our guru in this space. I've given her email there. She is online, but I look forward to some discussion and any questions that you guys might have. And that's me.
Great. Thanks, Kelvin. A really nice overview of the program. We'll save questions and answers to after our second speaker. So if any of you have any questions or comments, put it in the chat and the Q&A, and we can pick that up later. So our second speaker is Dr. Joe Gajewski, as head
Gajewski.
Yeah,
Gajewski.
Thank you for getting correcting me there. Joe is head of the grants office at the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health. So with experience in research, program development and business, we look forward to hearing from Joe from the grant opportunities available for early career researchers. And I suppose with a particular viewpoint of, for those working within a medical research institute like the Florey, how do things look a little bit different? Are there extra opportunities if you're embedded in a research institute compared to free-range university person? Be interesting to hear your comments. So over to you, Joe.
Just checking that my slides are there and you can see them all okay. I'll see that one. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, that was a great introduction. Thank you. So I'm just going to talk a bit about, where can you find these opportunities to fund your research, some resources you can access, what sort of other opportunities you might consider applying for outside the Stroke Foundation, and also what happens when you do get that grant and some of the considerations you might want to think about. So as a starting point, we apply for grants via our institute as well as through a department in the Florey. So we have an affiliation with the University of Melbourne. So depending on the grant type and the scheme, we will make the decision whether to apply for the grant through the Florey department or the Florey Institute. There's advantages and disadvantages to either of those. It's just weighed up for each particular scheme. So from this audience, I'm not really sure how many of you are affiliated with MRIs or universities, but yeah, you'd be able to apply for grants via your university department or your MRI, I'm assuming. So where to find grant opportunities? So there's many places you can search up grant opportunities. Grant Connect, which I've got a screenshot of here, has all the Australian government opportunities in here, where you can find all the guidelines, associated documents, draft grant agreements associated with each scheme. This is quite a comprehensive site for government schemes that are on offer, from NHMRC to MRFF to ARC to Department of Health grants to all sorts of grants. So this is a good resource to go in and find all those associated guideline documents that you might wish to look for when you're considering an opportunity. I've also got up here a little screenshot of the research professional site. So a lot of universities do subscribe to this to research professional, and you can actually access this site to look at opportunities outside of government opportunities. So this would have everything from national to international opportunities listed in this site, and it's quite comprehensive, and there's a lot of information in there. But you can subscribe to this site with some keywords and get regular email updates which list relevant grants in areas that support your disease-specific research area. So it's a good idea to subscribe to some of these sites to actually get those regular updates in your inbox, so you can scan through and see what opportunities are coming up or what grant opportunities have opened. We internally have our own curated grants bulletin that is focused on informing our researchers of grant opportunities around the disease areas within the Institute. So our internal researchers subscribe to that and get those in their inbox. And your own institutes may have similar bulletins that you can subscribe to. So it's worth looking at that also. As far as, what opportunities to apply for, there's a lot of opportunities in the trust and foundation area, and state or territory specific opportunities where the pool of applicants would be a bit more limited. So your chances of success is a bit higher. So for instance, I've got VIC schemes in brackets there, BGRF and other VIC government schemes that are targeted to Victorian-based researchers. So you're only competing against the pool within your state. So for some of these, the success rate can be a bit higher. And there's also, as spoken about previously, grants aimed at early career and mid-career researchers that also have a limited pool of applicants. There's schemes that have career disruptions and parental grants that will fund people that have been impacted by that. And there's also other collaborative international opportunities that do have quite a high success rate if you have those partners overseas that you can link with. In the next slide, I'm just going to run through just some examples of some schemes that, are run on an annual basis. With a lot of these trusts and foundations, they have, like the Stroke Foundation, they have their annual grants round, and they more or less open around the same time, close around the same time of the year. So you can plan ahead in targeting, thinking about what schemes you wish to target in the following year. So you can, not leaving it to the last minute. But so you can look ahead and target some of these particular schemes for the year ahead if you're not ready to go in and the deadline is too close. So things like Brain Foundation, Club Melbourne Fellowship, Jack Brockhoff, which is targeted within 3 years of your PhD. So that's for those very early career researchers. The Brain and Behaviour Research Foundation, Rebecca L. Cooper, Vesky Victoria Fellowships. I'm just naming a few here to put some schemes out there to consider. And a lot of these are all really targeted at those early career researchers. Some of these schemes they have eligibility rules around institutes and MRIs as to they can only apply every other year. So keep that in mind when you're looking at some of these schemes. So Rebecca L. Cooper has recently, we weren't eligible to apply this year for the Rebecca L. Cooper, so people will have to wait for the next round and the next year to apply. And some other schemes, obviously Stroke Foundation, who you just heard a lot about, Heart Foundation and Equity Trustees and Perpetual Impact. These are all schemes run annually that have a really quite a high success rate. We've had quite a lot of success in these schemes, and as was mentioned in the previous talk, they're applying for these trust and foundation type grants gives you that a pot of money where you can do those pilot studies and get that data together to apply for those bigger schemes that are more competitive. So when you're just starting out, having these smaller trust and foundation grants on your CV it looks good for those applying for those other schemes, and for feasibility and your feasibility of undertaking those larger grants. And I know for a lot of our internal researchers, when they do apply for a lot of these trust and foundation grants, when they're in the first few years of their postdoc, it's putting senior researchers or more experienced CIs on your grant as associate investigators does strengthen your application. So here are some more government schemes that I've just listed here, which may not be applicable to everyone in this room, but I guess NHMRC, maybe not investigator grants. So we've had quite a bit of success with investigator grants being awarded to clinician researchers. So that could be a consideration amongst this group, and early career clinician researchers being successful in this scheme. Ideas grants are not targeted for clinical research, which I think is probably more so this group. So that's probably not as relevant for this group. And then you've also got the international scheme. So these are a bit more competitive. NIH, DOD, they have very specific disease areas that cover stroke and other conditions that would be relevant to this group. If you have international partners, these might be a good way to go if you can bring together that consortium of people to apply for some of these larger grants. And then I've listed the University of Melbourne specific fellowships here and others that might be applicable to some people in this group. There's also the early career awards and prizes, and there's a host of these out there that you can apply for. And these give you small sums of money. They're targeted to early career. They look great on your CV as well. So this is also a consideration to target these prizes and other early career opportunities in this space as well, not just looking at grants in particular and project grants. So when you're applying for these grants, like as I mentioned earlier, it's this plan ahead. Look at what schemes you could potentially target. Get advice on your eligibility. Contact your grants office or your research office or whoever the person is at your particular institute that coordinates these applications. get in touch with them early to discuss what you want to apply for, and they can give you some great advice on guidelines and eligibility around those schemes. And the sooner you get in contact with them, obviously, the more assistance you can potentially get from them. We at the Florey, we review all our grants that go in. We review budgets. We look at the grant guidelines to ensure that all the applicants are within the guidelines. And another a good thing to do at this preparation stage is also look at other successful grants. I know at the University of Melbourne, they have a library with thousands of successful grants in there that you can access and that you can read, and for schemes that you may be applying to. So if you haven't written a lot of grants, it's really good. It's a really good idea to go and actually just read some successful grants in some of the schemes that you're intending to apply to. And once you're going through this application process, there's probably a series of steps at your institute that you need to go through in order to get approval to submit that application. So another good reason not to leave it to the last minute. And obviously, sign off is required for all grants that go through our institute, but, the budgets need to align. If there's indirect costs applicable, they need to be applied as well. And also another consideration for some of these fellowship schemes is they often, there may be a shortfall in the funding for your salary as well, if it's a salaried type fellowship. So there's also considerations around that as well, and that will be influenced by policies at your institute or your university, or how they support those fellowships as well. So that's another reason to get in there early as possible to start preparing that application and getting that advice. And I've just got a few slides on post-award. So what happens when you get this grant and the sort of things you need, and if you haven't managed a grant before, there's new considerations to take into account. And so I've just listed some things here that you might want to consider once you get this grant, which might involve agreements and sign off on contracts with the funding body. How that funding is going to be received, whether it's linked to milestones, progress reports, invoiced in stages, thinking about how you're going to get paid for that grant, whether you need ethics, human, animal ethics in place before you can commence that project, and whether that will impact the start date of your project, which it can do. And if you're collaborating with anyone else on that project, then you'll need other agreements put in place with other institutes, whether you need service agreements, MTAs, data transfer agreements, any kind of agreement relating to undertaking that project. So it's a really good idea when you get awarded this grant to sit down with your research office, so whoever you need to at the university, to plan out what you actually need to put in place to get this grant going. And just as a final, grant variations, things happen, obviously. Things don't always work the way you intend them to. And so it's a good idea, if things aren't tracking along as you expect while you're undertaking your project, to get in touch with the funder through your grants office and let them know. And, it's science, nothing goes perfectly, and at times you might need to defer a start date, extend an end date. All these variations are relatively common in grants, so I guess don't leave it to the last minute, and get in touch with who you need to get in touch with. And that's it. Thank you. Questions?
Thanks, Jo. That's fantastic. I think my observation is that, you've beautifully illustrated that this is really complex. It's a really complex environment, and I think early and mid-career researchers need guidance and curation of the funding opportunities, and this is where your host institution will hopefully be helping you. And we tease our academics at the University of Sydney and say, if you only read one email a week, which might be a challenge for some of our colleagues, read the 4 p.m. research office Monday email, because our research office sends out the curated list of grant opportunities every Monday at 4 p.m. And it just saves a huge amount of time to individually, laboriously, trawl through websites to find out, what's happening. And we all need that sort of help. And my other comment is there is an opportunity cost to you in being a grant applicant. It will take you time to do this well. And I think you also need guidance from your supervisor or mentor for your sort of research, where are you more likely to get the money? And in my role at the medical school here in Sydney, I spend a lot of time meeting with academics. And for some, I met a surgeon last year where, because of their particular interest, philanthropic funding was likely to be their best bet. I meet other people whose discipline is much more medical research future fund, and others has to be the small grant opportunities because they're at that stage of their career. But I agree, the investigator grant is a possibility, and I've seen quite junior early career researchers who, with a fantastic track record in what they've already done, have managed to score an investigator grant, so it's not impossible. And even though it might look daunting, because you are marked on your track record in relation to opportunity at your stage of your career. So anyway, enough of me talking. I put a question for Kelvin in the chat, in the Q&A, sorry, and Kelvin's already answered. And Kelvin, do you want to just speak to those answers that you've given? I was basically interested in some examples of the leverage ability of getting a small grant. And Kelvin, you've given some nice examples there.
Well, Michelle has given some nice examples. She's been rabbiting away, passing on the information. But yes, we've got some really good examples of a very modest seed grant then going on to get an MRFF grant, for example. So it can be leveraged up if you've got the right, all the things that we've discussed. The right track record and the right answers to then build on to go for those bigger grants. So yeah, there's been some really good success stories.
Fantastic, and the details are in the Q&A that hopefully you can all see. So we've now got a little bit of time for questions or comments. So I think we've got a different flexible ways that people could do this. You can put it in the Q&A, or you can unmute and ask the question directly, I think. So open the floor to questions. Or comments. While people are thinking,
I think Vincent's got a question.
Vincent.
His hand up.
Oh, right. Yes. Vincent, far away.
Joe, what is the most common mistake you see when a young researcher submits a grant? Mistake or oversight?
Look, I think really following the guidelines. Like if they put in, the guideline document, we want a section on this, literally use those headings in your grant. So because they're often, the way the guidelines are stated, that's how it's how they're graded, I guess, or how they're, how they're assessed. So if you make it really obvious that you've addressed every section that's being assessed in your grant, then that makes it so much easier for the assessors to just sit there. Yep, they've addressed impact. Yes, they've addressed, feasibility. Just really follow the guidelines and format to a T. And not
Yeah.
too many acronyms. I've got a thing against acronyms.
Oh, Joe, I couldn't agree more. You've got to remember the stroke community is very small, and because we're all working with each other, it is highly likely that your stroke grant goes to someone who may not even be in stroke medicine, but who is a medical researcher. So acronyms are completely poisonous to the reviewer, who's often doing this with a gin and tonic on board at 9 o'clock at night after they put the kids to bed. And, you know, you need to make it as easy as possible. And I recommend that if you've got, you know, a complicated treatment name, you spell it out in full and then put in brackets referred to as the treatment there from, you know, from now on. Just use simple language, and it makes it so much easier to read. If the reviewer can't read it easily, they're going to mark it down. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. That's the main comments in when I'm reading through someone's grant. What is this acronym? Explain this acronym. Remove this acronym.
And remember that acronyms, the same acronym can be different in different specialties. And I always tease people that, you know, PR might mean public relations to you, but it means a per rectal exam to me as a geriatrician. And
I think from our perspective, just to reiterate, the criteria, like we try and be as explicit as we can, and we still have people apply. Like Michelle still goes through and rules people out because they simply don't fit the criteria. And like it's a tough gig trying to find funds, but yeah, as you've said, Richard, just be really clear about what the opportunity cost is to try and fit and your research idea into this box when it really doesn't fit neatly.
one of my tips is also to artificially give yourself the deadline a week or two before the real deadline. And I learned two reasons I say that. One of the CRE applications we did until we got our CRE funding was at a time when I was about to go away on holiday. So I actually submitted it about a month before the deadline, and the research office were hugely grateful. I made so many friends because I was so ahead of the deadline, and that it's always useful to have friends in the research office, Joe. Isn't that true? And the other reason I say this is in my job as deputy head of the medical school, I'm the school approver for grants. And it's incredibly irritating when you get the authority to submit form within hours of the deadline. Because, you know, I might be doing a ward round. It's not easy for me to log in and approve something right at the last minute. And just think of your colleagues who have to do the approvals. You know, give them lots of time and you will make friends. And the more friends you make in the research office, the easier it is to call in a favor when you really need it. So that's my hint.
That is very true. 100% stand behind that. The last minute, trying to get last minute sign-offs from director and head of department is not ideal. And if you give us a draft of something early enough, we have time to sit and read it for you. If you're giving it to us the day before, you just do a minimal check.
So another trick that you taught me, Richard, is never give up, right? We tried several times for this CRE and eventually got it, right?
So the first CRE application was 2007. We came 7th and they funded 6th. Our mark went down in 2008, and then we had a pause while we did some work funded by the Stroke Foundation and the SSA. And then we put in an application in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So this current CRE was my 5th attempt over a 15-year period. And when the grant finishes in 2028, that'll be 21 years from when we first started trying to get the money to the end of the funding. And it's a bit of an extreme example, but I think, Vincent, you make the point that if you've got a good idea, you know, stick with it, develop it, make it better, and persistence can pay off.
I don't think we say enough how often we have failed before people became successful. And I think that's a very good lesson, especially to early researchers, is that, yeah, failure is part of the game.
Failure is part of the game. And it's a bit like when you get your paper sent back from the journal with all the referee comments, that initially in my early career, I was irritated. But now I look at it as an advantage. If I can address all these criticisms and comments, I'm going to be making it better. And if you turn it round that way, so a failed grant application that you've had some feedback on means that you can get it better. And our failed CRE applications, I went and got my homework marked and incorporated the comments from my very senior colleagues who were kind enough to give me feedback of why we didn't, pass. And to be honest, the difference between the penultimate unsuccessful and the successful application was nearly all presentation. I met with a very senior academic at the University of Sydney who, female, loved colour coding, and we colour coded our application. We put maps in, a few more diagrams. So the content wasn't much different, but we dramatically improved the readability. And I think that's another hint that presentation as well as content is equally important in this game. Now, Fiona, have we got any other questions lurking? Maybe not.
There is one, I think. The question and I can only, are all of the grants higher education based? Any grants for lived experience stroke survivors? Maybe Calvin, you can take that on.
So it's a great question. So, and Michelle can if I get this wrong, she can jump in. We've recently had this discussion internally and changed. So I believe that our grants round will be open to people with lived experience. Certainly we heavily encourage people with lived experience to be on the team. But that's right, isn't it, Michelle? We have expanded. You can come off.
Yeah, our future leader grants in the most recent round were we encouraged people with lived experience to apply for those.
We had an applicant from in that category. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we had a good response to that. So hopefully might be offered again in future years.
Fantastic. It's amazing how things have changed over the years. Anyone else wish to unmute and ask a question verbally or put it in the Q&A? If not, maybe we can give ourselves an early mark. It's always good to get an extra 10 minutes of the day, get that coffee, recharge for the afternoon. So thanks everybody for attending today, and thanks in particular to our speakers, Kelvin and Joe. I hope this was useful to those of you joining online. Keep an eye out for the next series of seminars, and keep an eye out for our call for the CRE grants that will be announced very soon. And I hope we can look forward to meeting some of you at the Asia Pacific Stroke Conference in Adelaide next week, and in particular the CRE ASDN workshop on Wednesday morning. So thank you all, and we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.